tell us about Miry's List and kind of why you started the organization.
So Miry's List is a nonprofit organization that I founded in 2016. We work with families who are resettling as refugees in the United States. We're based here in Eagle Rock. However, we work with families all over the country. Currently, Miry's List families live in 24 states nationwide. The situation when a family is coming through the federal government's refugee admissions program is often with a lot of confusion and exhaustion and obviously grief and oftentimes trauma. And what we do at Miry's List, as a community-based organization, we support families for 12 months from their time of arrival. And we are here in addition to what's provided by the government. And we want to make sure that families have a community support system. And that is really the point of Miry's List. The reality is that most of the families who are in our program, they're coming from countries including Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Iran. More recently, we're enrolling families from Ukraine, Moldova. These families are coming from communities where they had a vast network of family and friends.
Yeah.
And so, just imagining just one day without friends is hard to imagine. I'm just getting over COVID right now, and just in my own home, being without my friends for 5 days was heartbreaking. I didn't feel like I could even recognize myself. And that is a lot of what our families report feeling. It is so lonely. And so the programs that are offered by Miry's List, they're very focused on specific challenges that refugees face. So, for example, our rapid response program, that's something that is going to impact a family's first 30 days. That is to address the tremendous challenge of families starting out in homes without the essential supplies they need to be safe, comfortable, and functional. So rapid response is all about making sure that everyone in the family has a place to sleep at night, a comfortable bed.
Okay.
And our approach through this program, because the point of the program is, yes, we want to get every single family a bed, but also we want to leave them feeling a sense of autonomy and a sense of, wow, there are a lot of people that really care that I'm comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the dual approach that we take with all of our programs. And what we feel is a success is that at the end of the 12 months, a family will feel so wrapped in love and nurturing that they will have nothing else to do but pour that out into somebody else who needs help,
Oh,
because we all have something to give.
yeah.
And that is the cycle of giving.
Yeah, that's so they can then sort of become a volunteer or
Yeah.
even perhaps like join work
Yeah.
for Miry's List.
Yeah. Actually, most of our staff are people who have lived experience with this and who graduated from our program. And many of our volunteers as well. It is a human instinct. As soon as we have our needs met, our human instinct is to wonder, are my neighbors okay? Are the people that I see at my kids' school drop off, do they have what they need?
Yeah.
And so that is a formal part of our program as well, is for everyone. There is no like one income threshold that is the one who gives service. It's literally all of us have something to give. And that approach has totally changed my life.
How has your work with Mary's List enhanced your understanding of what it means to be a neighbor in your community, which was kind of like the entire answer of what you just gave in some ways. But has it kind of changed your understanding of that?
Um, well, I know so many more people now
Mhm.
than I did before Mary's List began. And it really just started with a couple of friends, and it started growing pretty quickly from there. once we started kind of getting the word out that we were collecting supplies for one family that they had just arrived from Syria. People were coming from all over Eagle Rock, all from Silver Lake, from Echo Park, from all over Northeast LA, because what we were learning at the time is so many American people want to help refugees and they want an easy mechanism to do so.
Yeah.
And so just making it available brought so many people together around this kind of one family.
Yeah.
And at Miry's List, we refer to our families as our families, but also we say new neighbors, our neighbors, new American families. All of these are terms that are accurate and how we, will describe the people who are benefiting from our programs.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important that we can acknowledge that you don't have to live next door to someone to think of them as your neighbor, to think of them as your kind of partner in making the community better. And there's a saying that I love it's an Arabic proverb, and it says, "We and the moon are neighbors." And I love that because it's just such a beautiful and poetic way of putting it. But like all of us, billions of human beings, are just standing on this spinning ball of fire,
Yeah.
and we're just in space.
Mhm.
And that means we're all neighbors.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
love to think about it like that.
Yeah, that it kind of reminds me, well, that this question of technology in the sense of like, in some ways that's helped us see our neighbors, but in other ways, I think it's can draw us apart because we can just be sitting, in our houses. But in other ways, it helps us see the world. And how do you think technology has made us less or more connected to our neighbors, and or both?
Mhm. Um, well, I think that things really shifted drastically during COVID when access to technology became equal to access to an education. And when schools shut down and families were coming to the US, there was a short time that the refugee program paused during COVID, but families were coming basically the whole time. And, for a family who's coming without a built-in network of friends, and a community, it's very difficult. That isolation that all of us felt
Mm,
really just kind of burning inside our soul, that was very much exacerbated for folks who are in the Mary's List program. And, recognizing that kids could not access their classrooms without a device at home,
yeah.
that quickly became, this isn't a luxury, this is a necessity,
Uh-huh.
because it is their human right to be able to access their classroom. And, here we are talking about this. It's 2023, our schools have reopened, but meanwhile, in Afghanistan, girls and women are not allowed to go to school after seventh grade.
Mhm.
And their access to education has been taken from them.
Mhm.
And it is a negotiation of a lot of conflicting feelings.
Mhm.
And our families rely on technology because, that is your translator in your pocket.
Yeah.
That is going to let you call your mom and let her know that you arrived safely.
Yeah.
When your partner goes to a grocery store and you're in a new neighborhood and you don't know when they're going to be back, your phone is the only way you can communicate with them. And like for families who have been separated, like imagine being separated from your partner at the airport, and then they get on a plane and they leave the country and you don't know when you're going to see them again.
That sounds terrifying.
And for the kids, and then reuniting as a family some months later, 6 months later, a year later, that's going to take time for that wound to heal.
Mhm.
And so a cell phone for somebody in that situation is going to be a comfort to know that you are tied to that person, that they are not going to be taken away from you the way that they have been. This is a valid fear.
Yeah.
And it will probably take more than a generation for some of these wounds to heal. And so I would say technology is an absolute necessity, not a luxury. And that means I'm talking about cell phones, I'm talking about laptops, I'm talking about tablets for younger kids. For our families, these are absolute essentials for keeping in touch, connecting with the outside world, and education.
Mhm. Yeah, I see how all of that is just so important. And yeah, and how you meant like how in COVID it just became even more.
Yeah.
And I imagine it was hard, or people didn't know necessarily, not that they can go back or back to where they came from, but just during COVID, all of this was like even more uncertain about like what was going on with their family members and
Yeah.
they could ever leave. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were times where there were COVID surges through refugee camps and very little health care.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
very, very frightening. Even here, we have world-class hospitals that were like setting up beds in parking lots.
yeah.
So, like, I think that that experience really gave people whose lives have never been directly impacted by war or really have ever been in a situation where they had to flee persecution or something like this. And this is like what ties the experience of all refugees together all over the world. Everyone has a unique experience that is totally their own. The thing that ties them together is they fled violence or persecution and they can't return home.
Well,
And then COVID happened, and then suddenly everyone now has this firsthand experience of really what it feels like to be afraid of what's on the other side of the door.
well, yeah.
Because most reasonable people were feeling that.
Yeah.
And so that does connect us in a way with what it might feel like to be afraid,
Mhm.
just even in your own home.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people that were like, all right, we're going to go move to the mountains for a couple of years. We're going to go
True.
get a house in Hawaii. We're going to go visit my family in Australia. They have a totally different, COVID situation. And like, that's migration.
Mhm.
That is what families do. They look at the cards they're dealt, they look at the resources they have, and they say, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is going to have the safest outcome for our family. And ultimately, that is what the experience of a refugee family really is.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, it changed the way many people live or where they decided they could live. I mean, and had the privilege to do that.
Yeah.
Many of us here.
Yeah.
Um, so what would you say? What kind of relationships have developed between the volunteers and the people in the program? And you were saying sort of like a lot of the time the people in the program become the volunteers.
Mhm.
So I imagine there's been friendships and many different kinds of relationships that have developed. But what sticks out to you the most?
Yeah. Well, we launched a program called SANA, SANAH. It stands for Supporting American Newcomers at Home. It's a virtual home learning program. And we originally launched it because our families were saying we need English classes that we could do from home. And so we thought, okay, let's just bring on some volunteers, tutors,
Yeah.
give them a kind of ESL based social emotional curriculum. Let's connect these helpful volunteers with families, and everyone will learn English. It'll be great. Make some new friends. And we ran that program for a few consecutive kind of cohorts of students and volunteer tutors, 12 weeks each. And what we found when we were doing surveying the participants on both sides is that while the whole thing was in the context of having a conversation in English, they were not sticking to the curriculum. People were not talking about grammar and letters and how to spell things. They were talking about why are the chickens so big at the grocery store and in November? Like, tell me about Ramadan. I hear about it, but I don't really know what it's all about. Oh, tell me about what you're wearing. I've never seen a dress like that. And this cultural exchange was happening because we were connecting people who had previously been intentionally isolated from one another by this kind of governmental program idea that refugees shouldn't be, quote, dependent on society. So let's make sure they have a caseworker for 90 days, but we don't want to kind of mix them up too much to make them dependent.
Mm.
But what we find again and again, every time we make these connections between our helpers, our volunteers, and our families, is that we're interdependent, all of us.
Mm.
We need each other. We need each other to learn about each other, but also to learn about ourselves. And I know that everyone who's reading this or watching this can probably relate to, someone asks you a question and you answer them and then you're like, oh my God, I just learned something about myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that happens all the time. And the other thing I notice is that resettlement is a time of transition. It is a transformative time in somebody's life. What are the hardest times in someone's life? Having a baby, getting married, and moving. Those are three of the five most stressful times in someone's life. And so if we can think of this big kind of global crisis of refugee resettlement as this is a transformative time for a family, and then we can intervene at that time with love and care and friendship and support, we're creating moments that will be remembered for generations, because every single person will remember the people that showed up for them in those transformative days. And they will tell their children about them if their children don't remember them, and they'll tell their children about them. And I think that that's really important for our volunteers to understand. Even volunteers that aren't sticking with it for 12 weeks to do a program, like even a volunteer who just like somebody who like writes one welcome card.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, I love that.
Like the person, I'm going to read it to you. She says, "Hello, new friend. Welcome to your new home. I know this has been a long journey for your family, and we are so lucky to be your new neighbors. We are happy to welcome you into our community, and we welcome you with open arms and full hearts. With gratitude, Anna." And she made this beautiful cover art. And, this little one.
Oh,
The,
oh, I love that. That's so great.
this one says, "Dear friend, welcome to the United States. It takes a lot of courage to make a big move like that, and I admire you for taking this risk. We welcome you with open arms. I hope to meet you one day soon."
Mm, that is so sweet. I just makes me want to tear up thinking about coming to this place of unknown and just receiving something like that. How much
So
that.
like what we send out hundreds of these. I have a box this high of them right next to me. And we get photos from our families back with these on the wall in the apartment, stuck to the refrigerator, in the windows, because it is the message that counteracts all of those fears of you don't belong here, you are isolated, your problems are yours alone, and nobody is there to care for you. These are valid fears that folks who have been on this journey can hold in their hearts. And then they receive these heartfelt letters, and it helps to counteract, to soften some of that with a little bit of wonder. Maybe I do have more friends than I realized here.
Yeah.
And maybe American people are welcoming towards refugees. Maybe the thing that I saw on the media about the way Americans feel about refugees isn't 100% accurate to the way my neighbors feel about me.
Mhm.
And that's how we can create bridges, even without people even meeting each other face to face.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's pretty powerful.
That's really powerful. That reminds me, does there tend to be a language barrier a lot of the time, or how does that work?
Yeah, typically, for a lot of our families, one or more of the family members will come already speaking some English
Okay.
because there are a lot of people that were English interpreters
Mhm.
in Afghanistan that
Okay.
um, worked with the US military there. However, in many cases, the entire family is learning English.
Yeah.
And that means that school age students are going in every day surrounded by, English speaking their contemporaries, and they're going to be in a English second language, program at their school. Um, the same isn't always true for their parents or older siblings, college age siblings who aren't necessarily going to be, as integrated into a daily English learning as the younger students. And that language barrier creates awkwardness. Socially, it's difficult to communicate with somebody who you don't share a first language with, but then also there's like all these fears in learning a new language, because basically, to boil down what it takes to learn a new language is you have to surrender to just being wrong.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can you just agree that you will be wrong a lot of the time? Because the fastest way to learn a language is just to practice. And then you have to practice being not perfect at something. And for some personality types, no problem.
Mhm.
For other personality types, that's really hard,
Yeah.
because there are people who are very perfectionistic that don't necessarily feel comfortable doing something unless they can do it 110%. And I know those people. That's not me, but that's really what it takes to learn a new language. And can you be vulnerable in a group of strangers to say something and potentially say it totally wrong?
Mhm.
And then that fear, like, what if I have an accent? What does my accent say about me? And then there's like, what can we do as people who are native English speakers? What can we do to make it more comfortable for people who are talking with us who are using an accent?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, I think that we can play a big part in making it more comfortable for them. And also just like remembering, if
Yeah.
somebody is speaking with an accent, that means that they speak more than one language. And that's admirable and
Oh,
impressive.
my son is in a dual immersion, and I do not speak another language, and just even for me, the fear of talking like to him sometimes feels overwhelming. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he's always correcting my accent. Um, so what advice would you give people who would like to reach out to their neighbors but don't know how to start? And that could include Mary's
Yeah.
list, of course.
Yeah. Well, I would say, no matter where you live, um, there are local community organizations working with refugees near you. Even if it's at the library, there are programs specifically for new Americans that are at the library. So I would say if somebody is really wanting to get involved locally, the best place to start would be Google and find out like who are the organizations working with refugees near you. Mary's List is based in Los Angeles, so for a lot of people in LA, they are working with us as a primary mechanism to become welcomers towards newcomers. Not necessarily people who are resettling here in Los Angeles only, though, because our families are all over the country. As I mentioned, we're now in 24 states, and hundreds of cities, by the way. We've like
That's
grown a lot.
incredible. That's been since I talked to you, or since
Mhm.
2019. I guess many years since.
Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. And actually, that was really the turning point when we started receiving a lot of requests for services from out of state. And now 30% of our program recipients live in the DC metro area. And there is a lot that we can do virtually to make sure that families feel connected. And just this morning, I was talking with somebody. She's a graduate of our program, and she is somebody who she's a cardiothoracic surgeon from Afghanistan, and
Wow.
she's taken herself through medical school for a second time to go back to where her heart is, which is doing surgery on people's bodies. I don't know why. It's not my thing, but it's hers. Her mom is also a cardiothoracic surgeon. And she has a 2-year-old. She has her hands full. She works at a luxury car dealership selling cars to make ends meet. And her life is hard. And, just I was talking to her on the phone, and I just like the amount of resilience and persistence and hard work and talent. And I mean, I cannot imagine being able to sell a car to someone, but also to be able to sell a car to somebody in another language. Like, she's also one of their top salespeople. So I'm like, literally anything that you do, you're going to be really good at it. Obviously, that's the kind of person you are. But, just being a friend is something that is so important to people. And I have been in 100 different points of my life that I just really needed a community support system. And so that's kind of what I try to draw from when I'm getting the chance to show up for somebody who's in a hard time in their life, and just listening, being a listening ear is a very, very powerful thing. And the other thing I want to mention, because, we talked a little bit about kids and classrooms and, new arrival students, they are enrolling in our public schools. They're in every single school district. They're resettling refugees. In my kids' school, there are 3 Ukrainian families who just got here this year. So, what can we do as parents and caretakers of our kids? How can we make sure that our kids are with the tools that they need to become the welcomers to those students,
Yeah.
to show them what they can do, even if it's something as simple as looking at someone and waving or just smiling at them. And I think that that is a way that we can create more opportunities for those bridges, whether it's in the classroom, at the playground, um, at our local school at Eagle Rock Elementary. We have an after school club called People of the World, and it is a 10-week training for welcomers. And it's for ages grades TK through second grade. And each week we focus on a different issue that kind of comes together to get these kids to a point where they can become the official welcomers of the school.
Oh, great.
And this is something that even a 4-year-old can understand, because it addresses such a basic human need, which is, this is it. Everybody wants to feel safe, they want to feel loved, and they want to feel important. And I can tell even your little one, he can understand that. That is, every single human being needs these things.
Yeah. Oh, that is so great. Um, well, thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything else you want to add or that comes to mind? Um, before
Um, 2 things that I want to add that maybe could be in like the links. So the first thing is a newer program of Mary's List. It's called our Welcomers Circle. And I will put a link in the chat to that. And for somebody who's like, oh, I really want to get involved, I really want to help, what's the best place to start? This is our monthly giving program. And, at whatever level, literally $10 a month is like a very helpful thing, because with monthly donations, we're able to plan for the future. And so that is like one of the most helpful ways that somebody can get involved. And then the other thing I want to say is, I don't know if you've seen this. You've seen this? Yes. Me and Jennifer wrote a book together.
yes, that's so great. Yeah.
And this is very helpful for parents who are, either reading this or watching this, and they're like, okay, I want to talk with my kids about this issue. This is a big topic though. What are the words that I use? So this book, that's why we wrote it. We wrote it so parents, teachers, caregivers, grandparents would have a way to have the difficult conversation about why people move around the world as refugees and what we can do to become the welcomers at our space. So that's another tool that's in the world. Yeah.
Awesome. We will definitely include those.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again.